When the alien commander died, only his human warrior came to honor him. The memorial hall of House Glavos stretched endlessly, its high, dark ceilings lost in shadow. Despite the hundreds of floating luminescent orbs that should have lit up the room with a soft glow, the space was eerily dark. The atmosphere was thick, heavy with grief, as though the weight of 1,000 unspoken words filled the air. Eva Glavos stood at the center of the hall, a solitary figure surrounded by silence. She was tall, her blue skin almost glowing in the dim light, and her silver hair hung down to her shoulders, dampened by the weight of her sorrow. Her radiant features, usually sharp and full of pride, were now dull, weighed down by the loss of her husband. The vast hall should have been full of mourners, allies, friends, and family, all paying their respects to one of the greatest military commanders the Galactic Alliance had ever known. Yet it was empty. Just the eerie hum of the glowing orbs and the hollow silence that surrounded her. The only sound was the soft rustling of Eva's black gown, a traditional Astrian mourning dress made of the darkest material, a fabric that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Eva's heart felt heavy, her chest tight, as she stared ahead at the memorial altar where her husband's ceremonial armor was laid out. Empty. The place felt wrong, as though something was missing, but it wasn't just her husband. It was the absence of the others, the high command, her husband's colleagues, and the rest of his comrades. There should have been a crowd, a gathering of those who knew and respected Zakar Talon, the man she had loved for 8 long cycles. But there was no one. Her heart twisted at the thought. Why did they stay away? She muttered to herself, her voice barely rising above a whisper. Her mind raced with questions. Was her husband's death truly just a tragic accident, or was there something more? Eva didn't believe the official report that claimed a routine patrol near the planet Nox had turned deadly. Zakar was no ordinary soldier. He had led the most elite joint human-Astrian combat unit in the Galactic Alliance, and his tactical brilliance was unmatched. There was no way he could have been taken down so easily. The doors at the far end of the hall creaked open, and Eva instinctively straightened her back. She prepared herself to greet some late dignitary or a representative who had shown up out of duty. But when her eyes landed on the figure that stepped through the doorway, she froze. A human male. His dark, battle-worn armor stark against the ceremonial light of the hall moved with a quiet grace. His figure was imposing, yet there was a rawness to his presence that seemed to fit the atmosphere better than any dignitary's polished uniform ever could. Eva's heart skipped a beat when her eyes locked with his, Declan Holt. The name flashed through her mind as he crossed the hall with slow, deliberate steps. He had been Zakar's battle partner for the past 3 years, fighting side by side in the most dangerous missions the Alliance had ever undertaken. Despite the years of camaraderie, Eva had never truly gotten to know the man. He was a soldier, an enigma in his own right, and in some ways he was a reminder of what had been lost. But now he was here, alone, without any fanfare, and it felt like an intrusion. As he drew closer, Eva could see the deep scar running down the side of his face, from his temple to his jaw. His eyes, a piercing green, met hers across the room, filled with something she couldn't quite place. Pain, regret, or perhaps something deeper, but there was no time to dwell on it. He stopped at the memorial altar, his gaze lingering on the empty ceremonial armor. Without a word, he pulled out a small lighter from his pocket and flicked it open. The flame caught with a fierce, bright glow, illuminating the room in a way the orbs never had. The small flame burned brighter than all the others, and for a moment the hall felt warmer, as though something had shifted. Zakar always said you were the fire that kept him alive, Declan said, his voice low but carrying easily in the stillness of the room. I thought it fitting I light the last one. Eva felt something crack within her, a deep ache that had been buried beneath her grief. Her hands trembled slightly as she held herself together. You're the only one who came, she whispered, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. I'm the only one who dared, Declan replied quietly. His gaze met hers, and there was a hint of sadness in his eyes, but also something else, something Eva couldn't place. They were all warned away. I didn't come here out of obligation, Eva. I came because it was the right thing to do. Eva felt a surge of anger. Why didn't they come? Why didn't the others show up? Her voice cracked, but she pushed through the tears that threatened to come. She couldn't hold it in anymore. Declan's expression softened, but there was a coldness in his eyes as he glanced around the empty hall. Your husband wasn't just another officer. He was the best of us, but when the truth came out, there were those who wanted him gone, and not everyone in the high command wanted the truth to come to light. Ava's pulse quickened. "What are you talking about?" she asked, taking a step closer. "What truth?" Declan didn't answer immediately. He reached out and touched the small candle at the altar, his fingers brushing the wick. A faint spark of fire flickered, and his hand lingered for a moment before he withdrew. "The truth," he said quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of his words, "is that your husband didn't die by accident. He was murdered, and the people who did it, they're still out there." Ava's heart stopped. Murdered? Her hands gripped the edge of the altar, her breath shallow. "Murdered?" she repeated, her voice hoarse. "Not here," Declan said quickly, his voice dropping to a whisper. He glanced around, ensuring they were still alone. "I'll explain everything, but we need to get out of here. They'll be watching us soon." The ground beneath Ava's feet felt like it was shifting. Her whole world had just turned upside down. The death of her husband had been a lie. Zakar had been killed for a reason, and Declan knew why. "Tell me everything," Ava demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. Declan met her gaze. His green eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that sent a chill through her. "I will, but not here. Not in the open." Ava nodded, her mind racing. The funeral, the lies, the cover-up, they were just the beginning. As she followed Declan down the corridor, Ava knew one thing for certain. The truth was out there, and she would stop at nothing to uncover it. The future of the Galactic Alliance and everything she had ever known was about to change forever. The atmosphere outside the memorial hall was just as cold and quiet as the space they had left behind. The hum of distant ships and the slow churn of engines in orbit were the only sounds that filled the emptiness. Ava followed Declan down the winding corridors of the House Glavos estate, her steps purposeful but heavy with a mix of shock and disbelief. Her mind kept replaying his words, "Zakar was murdered." The echo felt like a nightmare, but it was all too real. Declan led her to a private chamber, one deep within the bowels of the estate, far from the prying eyes of anyone who might be listening. The room was small, sparsely furnished, and lit by the soft glow of bioluminescent plants native to the Astrian homeworld. Ava took in the unfamiliar surroundings, but her focus remained on the human standing before her. Declan had already stripped off his military jacket, revealing the tight-fitting black combat gear beneath. His movements were precise, as if every action was a calculated one. Ava couldn't help but notice how different he was from the grieving widow she had once imagined him to be. He was a man on a mission, an ally, a soldier, but also a man who seemed to be hiding a storm beneath the calm surface. "You didn't come to pay respects, did you?" Ava's voice was quiet, though her eyes burned with the need to understand. She crossed her arms, trying to keep the trembling from her hands. "You came because you knew something, didn't you?" Declan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to a nearby table and activated a holographic display. Maps, star charts, encrypted data, fragments of files that only he could decipher, flickered to life in front of them. Ava moved closer, her heart racing with a mixture of curiosity and dread. "I've been investigating this for months," Declan said, his tone steady but laced with a quiet urgency. "Your husband wasn't just another officer. He was getting too close to something. A web of corruption that's far bigger than anyone realized." Ava narrowed her eyes, focusing on the display in front of her. There were encrypted files, coded messages, and images of ships moving between different sectors in the galaxy. Some of the coordinates were familiar to her, places she had never thought to question before. "Zakar uncovered a conspiracy," Declan continued, "one that goes all the way to the top. The military elite, the politicians, they've been involved with the Voidborn for years. They've been secretly trading technology, making deals behind closed doors and setting the stage for something much darker. Zakar was trying to expose them, and they knew it." Ava's stomach twisted. The Voidborn, her people's longtime enemies. They had been a thorn in the side of the Alliance for decades, their ships appearing like ghostly shadows in space, threatening everything in their path. For the Galactic Alliance to form alliances with them, it was unthinkable. "Why didn't he tell me?" Ava whispered, the question slipping out before she could stop it. "Why didn't he trust me?" Declan turned to face her, his green eyes darkened by the weight of the truth he was sharing. "He trusted you more than anyone, but there were too many eyes on you, Ava. If you knew, they would have come for you too." He had to protect you just like I'm trying to protect you now. Eva shook her head, the loss of Zacher suddenly feeling like a betrayal. He had kept her in the dark, not trusting her with the truth. He had protected her in his own way, but the walls he had built around her heart were now crumbling, revealing a dangerous new world, a world where the lines between allies and enemies had blurred. You're telling me that everything I've known is a lie? That my husband died because of this? Eva's voice cracked, her emotions swirling between anger and disbelief. Declan stepped closer, his hand reaching for her arm, but he stopped short, giving her space to breathe. I know this is a lot to take in, but you're not alone in this. I'm here to help you. Zacher was my friend, and I owe it to him to make sure the people responsible for his death are brought to justice. Eva met his gaze, her eyes fierce now, no longer filled with uncertainty. The grief was still there, lingering in her chest, but a new fire burned within her. Then we do this together. We expose them. We make sure they pay for what they've done. Declan nodded, his jaw set in determination. That's what I'm talking about. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of their shared purpose settling between them. Eva knew the road ahead would be long, dangerous, and fraught with betrayal. But she also knew one thing with certainty. Zacher's death had not been in vain. This fight, this war against the forces that had taken him from her, was just beginning. We need to move fast, Declan said, pulling up another set of encrypted files on the display. I've been tracking the movements of some of the key players. They're making their moves, and we need to stay ahead of them. Eva stepped closer to the holographic screen, her mind working rapidly to process the information. Where do we start? Declan's eyes flicked to the star charts, and he pointed to a set of coordinates. Here, a facility on the outskirts of the Nox system. It's been under construction for the past few months, and the military has been moving large amounts of resources there. It's suspicious, and I think it's where we'll find answers. Eva nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never been more sure of anything in her life. The search for the truth had begun, and she was ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. We go now, Eva said, her voice firm. Declan's lips twitched into a half-smile. I knew you'd say that. Together, they left the chamber, moving through the corridors with purpose. There was no time to waste. The conspiracy was bigger than they had realized, but they weren't backing down. They had one goal now, to find the truth, and to bring those responsible to justice. As they reached the landing bay, Eva felt a sense of resolve that she hadn't known since Zacher's death. The fight for her husband's memory had just begun, and nothing would stop her from getting the answers she deserved. Let's do this, Declan said, his voice steady and confident. Eva glanced at him, and for the first time since she'd learned the truth, a small spark of hope flickered in her chest. Together they would take on the darkness. Together, they would fight for the truth. The ship hummed softly as Eva and Declan made their way toward the docking bay, the low vibration of its engines a steady reminder of their mission. The corridors of the vessel were sleek and metallic, almost sterile in their design, but neither of them paid much attention to the surroundings. The weight of the situation bore down on them, heavier with each passing second. Eva's thoughts raced, her mind locked on the coordinates Declan had shown her. The facility on the outskirts of Nox was their first destination, the place where the truth would finally be laid bare. She glanced at Declan as they walked, his face stoic but his eyes sharp, scanning every corner as they moved through the ship. The silence between them was thick, each lost in their own thoughts, but the unspoken understanding between them was palpable. They were about to enter the heart of the conspiracy, and the danger was real. It wasn't just a matter of uncovering secrets, it was about survival. The landing bay doors hissed open as they approached, revealing a small transport shuttle waiting for them. Declan moved ahead, his boots echoing against the metal floor as he gestured for Eva to follow. He had been silent since their conversation in the chamber, but Eva could see the tension in his posture. She had always known him as a quiet man, but now there was something different about him. A quiet fury simmered beneath his controlled exterior, the kind that came with the weight of personal loss and betrayal. Eva's heart skipped a beat as she stepped inside the shuttle. The interior was compact, with just enough space for the two of them and the equipment they would need for the mission ahead. Declan strapped into the pilot seat and began powering up the systems, his movements quick and efficient. Eva settled into the passenger seat, securing herself as the shuttle began its ascent from the docking bay. The silence between them lingered as the shuttle cut through the atmosphere, the planet's surface receding below them. The stars beyond the viewport were a vast, cold expanse, each one a distant promise of something greater. Eva gazed at them for a moment before turning her attention back to Declan. "I still don't understand," she said, her voice low, almost to herself. "Why didn't Zakar tell me? We shared everything. He trusted me with his life, why not with this?" Declan's hands gripped the shuttle's controls tightly, his jaw clenched as he looked ahead. "He didn't trust anyone with this, Eva, not even you. Not because he didn't trust you, but because if anyone knew, they would have come after you. And I'm not sure you'd be safe now, if you knew the whole truth." Eva felt a knot form in her stomach. She had always known that her life as a member of the Astrian nobility was fraught with danger. But this was different. This wasn't just about politics or power. It was about survival. Her husband had been killed because of something much darker, and now she was being thrust into the very heart of that darkness. "I should have known," she muttered, her hands clenching in her lap. "I should have seen it." Declan didn't respond immediately. He just kept his focus on the controls, guiding the shuttle with a precision that spoke to his years of experience. After a few moments he spoke, his voice quieter than before. "None of us saw it coming. Not until it was too late." The shuttle's engines hummed louder as they broke through the last layer of the atmosphere, entering the cold vacuum of space. Ahead, the distant Nox system loomed, a cluster of stars and planets quiet and unassuming. Eva could feel the tension rise as they neared their destination. "Coordinates set," Declan announced, his tone sharp. "We're approaching the facility now." Eva's heart raced as she looked out the viewport. In the distance, a dark speck on the edge of the system slowly grew larger. A massive facility, nestled on one of Nox's barren moons. Its metal surface glinted faintly in the light of distant stars, an imposing structure that seemed to absorb the light around it. Eva's gut tightened at the sight. This was it, the place where the conspiracy had been nurtured, where Zakar had been trying to expose the truth. Declan's voice cut through the silence. "We're going to infiltrate. We'll need to be quick, precise. Get in, get the data, and get out." Eva nodded, her mind focused now. "What's the plan once we're inside?" Declan glanced at her, his green eyes sharp. "We'll use the access codes I've got. I've studied the facility's layout. There are several entrances, but we'll go through the maintenance shafts. They're the least guarded. We'll have to move fast, though. Once we're inside, the clock starts ticking." Eva felt a rush of adrenaline. "How much time do we have?" Declan didn't answer immediately, his attention divided between the controls and the growing facility ahead. "We don't have much. The facility security will go on high alert as soon as we start accessing their systems. We'll have to move quickly." As they approached the facility, Eva could feel her breath catch in her throat. This was it. This was the moment where everything would change. The lies would be exposed, and the truth would finally come to light. But at what cost? The shuttle shuddered slightly as Declan made a final approach, guiding them toward a concealed landing pad on the far side of the facility. The cold metal of the moon's surface was unforgiving beneath them, but Eva didn't notice. Her mind was focused on what lay ahead. There were still so many questions, so many mysteries that needed to be unraveled. Why had Zakar been targeted? Who had ordered his death? And what was the true purpose of the Voidborn Alliance? "Brace yourself," Declan said, his voice tight with focus. "Landing in 3, 2, 1. The shuttle touched down with a soft thud, the low rumble reverberating through the small cabin. Eva's heart pounded in her chest as the engines powered down, leaving them in the stillness of the cold moon. They had arrived. Declan was already unstrapping himself, his movements swift and practiced. Eva followed suit, the tension in the air palpable as they prepared to disembark. "You ready for this?" Declan asked, his eyes meeting hers. There was no trace of doubt in his gaze, only a quiet determination. Eva didn't hesitate. "Let's do this." Together they stepped out of the shuttle and into the unknown. The door behind them slid closed, sealing them inside the heart of the enemy's domain. The time for questions was over. Now it was all about uncovering the truth and surviving the consequences. The dark facility loomed ahead, its silent, empty corridors waiting to reveal their secrets. The chase had begun. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the narrow, sterile corridors as Eva and Declan moved cautiously through the darkened facility. The low hum of machinery resonated in the background, but it was the silence between them that felt the heaviest. Every corner they turned, every shadow they passed made Eva's skin prickle. She had never imagined she would be here, inside an enemy stronghold, hunting down the truth behind her husband's death. The cold air was sharp against her skin, and the fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, casting erratic shadows across the walls. The corridors were eerily quiet, but Eva knew better than to assume they were alone. This was not a simple military base, it was a covert operation, and the danger lurked in every crevice. Declan glanced at her, his expression unreadable. He was the first to break the silence. "We're close. I've accessed the facility's network. We'll be at the central data vault in a few minutes. Once we're inside, we'll need to pull the files and get out fast." Eva nodded, her thoughts focused on the mission. She had trained for situations like this, but nothing could have prepared her for the weight of what they were about to uncover. Her husband's death, the corruption, the betrayal. It all felt like a terrible nightmare that she couldn't wake up from. Declan stopped abruptly, holding up his hand as he motioned for Eva to be silent. "We've got company," he whispered, his eyes narrowing as he peered around the corner ahead. Eva tensed, her pulse quickening. She didn't need to ask who was coming. She could feel the tension in the air. Declan had always been quick to sense danger, but Eva had learned to trust her instincts too. She could sense the change, the feeling of being watched, the quiet before the storm. The sound of footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the faint hum of distant voices. Declan immediately pressed himself against the wall, signaling for Eva to do the same. She moved quickly, finding a small alcove to hide in as they waited for their moment. Her hand gripped the hilt of the small plasma pistol at her side. She wasn't about to let anyone stop them now, not when they were so close. The footsteps stopped just outside their hiding place. Eva could hear muffled voices, but the words were indistinct. She held her breath, praying that they wouldn't be discovered. The seconds stretched out, each one feeling like an eternity. "Clear," Declan finally whispered after a few tense moments. Eva exhaled slowly, trying to calm the racing of her heart. They had narrowly avoided detection, but they both knew they couldn't be so lucky next time. Declan motioned for her to follow, and they continued on their path. The silence of the facility was broken only by the distant hum of machinery and the occasional hiss of an automated door. Eva's thoughts were scattered, her mind jumping from one question to another, unable to settle. Who was behind all of this? Who had betrayed her husband and why? As they neared the central data vault, Declan's voice cut through her swirling thoughts. "Eva, I need you to focus. This is it. We get the data and get out. No distractions," she nodded, her jaw tightening. She couldn't afford to let her emotions cloud her judgment. They had a job to do. The door to the vault was ahead, a large reinforced barrier that stood between them and the truth. Declan moved quickly, accessing the terminal beside it with practiced efficiency. Eva stood watch, scanning the surroundings for any sign of movement. Declan's fingers flew over the terminal's interface, the screen flickering as he worked through layers of security. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his focus never wavered. Eva's mind raced. They were so close to uncovering the truth, so close to finding the answers they had both been searching for. With a soft beep, the door to the vault slid open, revealing a darkened room filled with rows of data storage devices. Declan moved swiftly, stepping inside and making his way to the central console. Eva followed closely behind, her heart pounding in her chest. "This is it," Declan muttered, his voice low but filled with a quiet intensity. "We get the data and we leave. No mistakes." But just as he reached for the data terminal, a voice rang out from the shadows behind them. Well, what do we have here?" Eva froze, her blood running cold. The voice was familiar, too familiar. Her eyes snapped to the doorway where a tall, imposing figure stepped into view. It was Ambassador Nereus, the high-ranking diplomat who had been with them just days ago. His silver eyes glinted with a dangerous gleam, and the faintest smile curled his lips. Eva's stomach churned. Nereus. She had never trusted him. But this was something far worse. "You," Declan spat, his hand instinctively moving to the weapon at his side. "You're behind this." Nereus didn't flinch. He merely raised an eyebrow, his smile widening slightly. "Behind what, Commander Holt? Behind your little rescue mission?" Behind your attempt to expose something that was never meant to be uncovered? Ava's mind raced as she processed the implications. Nereus had been working against them from the very beginning. He had known about their investigation. He had been playing them all along. The betrayal was not just political, it was personal. You were part of this from the start? Ava demanded, her voice trembling with disbelief. You were behind Zachar's death? Nereus chuckled softly, a sound that sent a chill through Eva's bones. Oh no, I didn't give the orders. I merely followed them. But yes, I knew. And I knew you'd come. That's why I was so certain you'd be here, Lady Glavos. Eva's heart sank. You knew we would find this place? I knew you'd come looking for the truth, Nereus replied, his tone calm, almost amused. And I knew you wouldn't like what you found. But now the real question is, what will you do with it? Declan stepped forward, his voice harsh. What do you want, Nereus? You've got everything you need. Why go to all this trouble to cover up a simple death? Nereus's smile faltered just for a moment before his face regained its usual composure. It's never just a simple death, Commander. It's about the future. The galaxy is changing. Alliances are being forged, and the power structure is shifting. Zachar was a threat to that. You both are. Ava felt a knot tighten in her chest. This was bigger than she had imagined. Nereus wasn't just a politician. He was part of something far more dangerous. This wasn't about one man's death, it was about control, about power. You think you can stop this? Nereus continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. You can't, you're already too late. The forces you're up against are much larger than you know. Eva's mind was spinning, but one thing was crystal clear. Nereus had to be stopped. He had been playing them from the very start. But he wasn't just an obstacle. They were up against a much larger force, a conspiracy that stretched across the galaxy. Declan's voice broke through her thoughts, firm and unwavering. We'll stop you, Nereus, one way or another. Nereus tilted his head as though considering the challenge. I hope you're ready to face the consequences of your actions, he said, his voice laced with a cold finality. In that moment, Eva realized the true scale of what they were up against. They had uncovered a small piece of the puzzle, but the conspiracy was far bigger than they could have imagined. And now, the game was no longer about uncovering the truth, it was about survival. The atmosphere in the data vault was suffocating, the hum of the machinery around them the only sound that cut through the tense silence. Eva's mind raced. The revelation that Ambassador Nereus was a part of the conspiracy hitting her like a blow to the chest. Every instinct told her to act. This was the moment they'd been preparing for. But Nereus's presence was a stark reminder that they were far from safe. The weight of the situation pressed on her shoulders, but there was no turning back now. Nereus's tall, imposing figure stood between them and the exit. His silver eyes glinted with a cold, calculating amusement, and his lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Declan's hand rested on his weapon, his posture tense but ready. Eva's heart pounded, her mind flooded with a mixture of anger and disbelief. She had trusted him. They had all trusted him. But now it was clear he was not just a bystander. He was the puppet master pulling the strings from the shadows. You didn't just betray us, did you, Nereus? Eva said, her voice firm but laced with the sting of betrayal. You've been orchestrating this entire thing from the beginning. Nereus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving Eva's face. You still don't understand, do you? He asked, his tone smooth, almost pitying. This isn't about betrayal. This is about survival, about the future. The galaxy is changing, Lady Glavos, and those like you and Zachar, those who stand in the way of the new order, are nothing but obstacles. Eva's blood ran cold at his words. The implications were clear. This wasn't just about power, it was about control. The future of the galaxy, the fate of countless lives, was at stake, and Nereus was willing to sacrifice everything to ensure his vision of that future came to pass. Do you really think you can just erase us? Declan snapped, stepping forward, his eyes burning with fury. You're not invincible. You're just a part of a system that's about to crumble. Nereus's smile didn't waver. I'm not invincible, Commander, but the forces I represent are. You may have uncovered a small piece of the puzzle, but you're too late. Everything has already been set in motion. Ava felt a cold, sharp fear take root in her chest. What have you done? She demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. Nereus tilted his head, a faint gleam of satisfaction in his eyes. It's already done. The alliance between our government and the Voidborn is secure. The weapons shipments, the technology exchanges, everything. And once the Voidborn complete their mission, they'll have all the leverage they need. The Galactic Alliance will fall and we will rise. Declan's fingers tightened around the hilt of his weapon, but Eva's mind was working quickly. If what Narya said was true, then everything they had fought for, their mission, their lives, was meaningless. The future they had been working toward, the hope for peace, was all a lie. They were being used as pawns in a game that they couldn't even comprehend. Eva turned to Declan, her eyes hard with determination. "We can't let him get away with this," she said, her voice a whisper but filled with unshakable resolve. Declan nodded, his jaw clenched tight. "We won't." Without another word, he moved, his hand shooting out to grab a nearby data terminal. With quick, fluid movements, he accessed the system, pulling up information faster than Eva could process. The data was overwhelming. Encrypted files, security protocols, mission reports, all of it painting a picture that made her stomach churn. The full extent of the conspiracy was far worse than she could have imagined. Nereus watched them with a detached interest, his expression unreadable. "You can't stop this," he said again, his voice like ice. "You're too late. This isn't just about Zachar's death. It's about reshaping everything. The Voidborn aren't just enemies, they're allies, and will control everything. You'll never see it coming." Eva's blood boiled with fury, but she forced herself to focus. There had to be a way to stop this, to break this chain of destruction before it was too late. "Declan," she said urgently, "we need to disrupt their systems. Now. Before they can activate the next phase of the plan." Declan's hands flew over the terminal, accessing deeper levels of encrypted data. The clock was ticking. Eva could feel it in the pit of her stomach. "We need to stop the transmission," Declan muttered. "If we can cut off their communication, we can slow them down. It's our only chance." Eva stepped forward, her mind sharp. "We need to find the control center. Where are they keeping the central communication relay?" Nereus let out a soft, almost condescending laugh. "You think you can disrupt everything with a few keystrokes? It's already in motion, Lady Glavos. There's no going back." But Declan was already moving, his hand pressed to the terminal. His fingers moved with practiced speed, bypassing firewalls, cracking security codes, and accessing data at lightning speed. He was trying to shut down their systems, trying to break their grip on the galaxy. Eva's breath caught in her throat as the terminal beeped, the words on the screen flashing red. "It's too late," Declan said, his voice tight with frustration. "I can't stop the transmission. They've already sent the signal." Nereus's smile widened, and for the first time a flicker of satisfaction crossed his face. "I told you. You're too late." Eva's mind raced, but her eyes narrowed in defiance. She wasn't going to let Nereus win. She wasn't going to let everything they had fought for, everything Zachar had died for, go to waste. "We can still stop you," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her. Nereus raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "How?" Eva took a deep breath. "You're not the only one who can play this game." Her hand reached for the small device at her belt, a data scrambler, an old tool from her husband's collection. She had never used it before, but in that moment it was the only hope they had. With a quick flick of her wrist, Eva activated the device. The scrambler sent out a signal that was designed to disrupt enemy communications, scramble transmissions, and cause chaos within their systems. The hum of the machines around them grew louder, and the lights flickered as the device worked its magic. Nereus's expression shifted. The confident smile faded, replaced with a flash of irritation. "You think this will stop us?" He sneered. "It's a start," Eva replied, her heart pounding as the data terminals around them began to flicker and glitch. The systems were unstable. They had only seconds to act. Declan's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw a spark of hope in them. "We can do this," he said, his voice quiet but filled with determination. Nereus's gaze darkened, his lips curling into a snarl. "You're playing with fire," he spat. "You'll regret this, but it was too late." Eva and Declan had set the wheels in motion. Now they had to finish what they started, before the entire galaxy was consumed by the darkness that Nereus had unleashed. The final confrontation had begun, and this time, they wouldn't back down. The data scrambler hummed to life in Eva's hand, its faint blue glow pulsing in rhythm with the rapid flicker of the terminals around them. The facility, once a fortress of hidden power, was now under siege, not by a fleet of ships but by two determined souls who had uncovered the darkest secrets of the galaxy. For the first time, the walls of the facility seemed to pulse with vulnerability. The hum of machinery grew louder, and the lights overhead flickered erratically as if the entire building itself was holding its breath. Narius stood before them, his earlier smugness now replaced by visible frustration. His eyes narrowed as he glanced at the malfunctioning terminals, the signals that he had relied on to keep the conspiracy intact, now slipping through his fingers. The smile that had once seemed so impenetrable faded, replaced by a cold, calculating look. "You think this will stop anything?" Narius sneered, his voice sharp like a blade cutting through the tension. "This is just a temporary setback. You're meddling with forces that are far beyond your understanding." Ava's grip tightened on the scrambler. She wasn't afraid anymore. The confusion, the anger, the sense of helplessness had all dissipated, replaced by a singular clarity. They were going to take this facility down. They were going to bring Narius and his dark alliances to their knees no matter the cost. "I don't need to understand your forces," Ava said, her voice unwavering. "I only need to stop you." Behind her, Declan moved with the grace of a seasoned soldier, his eyes scanning the room. He'd already checked the exits, ensuring that no reinforcements would be able to close off their escape. Their plan had worked so far, but they weren't out of danger yet. The data scrambler was causing chaos in the facility's systems, but Eva knew it wouldn't be long before they tried to restore the connections. They needed more time, more leverage, and they needed to expose Narius for what he truly was. Declan turned to her, his expression determined. "We have to go deeper. The main server core is below this level. If we can get there and wipe the primary data, we can expose everything before they recover. We'll leave them with no way to cover it up." Eva's breath caught in her throat as the realization hit her. This was it. The only way to stop Narius and his network was to go right to the heart of the facility and destroy the very system that connected them all. It was a suicide mission in many ways. But in this moment, she knew there was no other choice. "You're right," she said, nodding. "Let's go." Without another word, Declan led the way, moving swiftly through the labyrinth of dark hallways, his movements quick and precise. Ava followed closely, her eyes scanning for any signs of movement, her every sense heightened. The stakes were higher than ever before. They were in enemy territory, with every step bringing them closer to the truth, and to the final confrontation with Narius's forces. They reached the elevator shaft at the end of the hallway, its metal door standing as an unyielding barrier between them and the server core. Declan immediately went to work, his hands quick and confident as he accessed the control panel beside the door. "Almost there," he muttered, his fingers flying over the interface, bypassing layers of security with practiced ease. Ava watched him, her heart racing. She trusted him more than she trusted anyone at that moment. He was their only hope. With a soft hiss, the elevator doors slid open. The underground passage was dim, its walls lined with cold steel doors leading to various sectors of the facility. But at the far end of the corridor stood the heart of it all, the central server room, a high-tech fortress protected by layers of biometric scans, firewalls, and military-grade encryption. Declan looked at Eva, his expression set in a determined mask. "We're going in. Get ready for a fight." Before Eva could respond, they heard the sound of footsteps. Heavy boots, a lot of them. The sound echoed through the steel corridors, growing louder by the second. Narius had sent his men. "Move!" Declan hissed, his voice urgent as he pushed the door open, signaling for Eva to follow him inside. The server room was a cavernous space, filled with rows upon rows of glowing servers, humming softly with the steady pulse of data. In the center of the room stood a massive control console, the nerve center of the entire facility. Eva's eyes locked onto it. That's where they had to go. Destroy everything before Narius's operatives arrived. Declan moved toward the console, his hand already reaching for the interface. But before he could connect to the system, the doors slammed open behind them. Soldiers, dozens of them, armed to the teeth and wearing the insignia of the highest command. The betrayal was complete. Narius had sent his personal guard to finish the job. Eva's pulse skyrocketed. She drew her weapon instinctively, her hand steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. "Declan, we don't have much time," she shouted, her voice fierce with urgency. Declan didn't flinch. He knew the stakes. "Cover me!" he ordered. In the next instant, chaos erupted. Ava and Declan opened fire simultaneously, the sharp crack of energy weapons filling the air. The soldiers rushed forward, their weapons raised, but Ava's aim was true. She fired with precision, taking down one guard after another, each shot fired with the weight of the truth they had uncovered. But they were outnumbered. For every soldier they took down, 2 more seemed to take their place. Declan worked quickly, his fingers flying across the console as he bypassed firewalls, disabling security systems with a speed that bordered on impossible. But the soldiers were closing in, and Ava could feel the pressure mounting with each passing second. "Declan!" Ava shouted as a soldier charged toward them, his weapon aimed directly at Declan's back. Without thinking, she fired, her blast knocking the soldier off course just in time. Declan didn't look up, his focus on the console unbroken. "We're almost there. Just a little longer," he called out, his voice tight with effort. Eva's eyes darted between the console and the approaching soldiers. There was no way they were going to hold them off forever. But they had to buy Declan enough time to finish what he started. They had to make sure the data was destroyed. A sudden, sharp pain cut through Eva's side. She gasped, her vision blurring for a moment as she staggered back. Her blood stained her uniform, but she couldn't stop. Not now. Declan glanced up, his eyes widening at the sight of her injury. "Ava!" he shouted, but she waved him off, gritting her teeth as she steadied herself. The mission was still their priority. She raised her weapon again, firing relentlessly. "Finish it, Declan!" she growled through gritted teeth. Declan nodded, his hands moving faster now with a desperate urgency that matched the rising chaos around them. And then, with a final keystroke, the console flashed, its lights blinking in rapid succession. A high-pitched whine filled the room as the data was destroyed. The servers began to malfunction, sparking and sputtering as the entire network began to collapse. The soldiers charged, but it was too late. Declan grabbed Eva's arm, pulling her back toward the exit. "We're done here. Let's move." Together, they sprinted for the doors, Ava's heart pounding, her side burning with pain. They didn't look back, not even once, as the facility erupted into chaos behind them. The data was gone. The truth was out, but Nereus wasn't finished. And they knew their fight had only just begun. The shuttle's engines roared to life, lifting them off the barren moon and into the cold void of space. Ava sat rigidly in the passenger seat, her breath shallow, the pain in her side a constant reminder of the battle they had just fought. Her hand was pressed against the wound, blood seeping through her fingers, but her mind was far from the injury. There was no time to dwell on that now. She stared out the viewport, her eyes fixed on the vastness of space, the stars scattered like diamonds against the black canvas. The silence of the cockpit was deafening, and yet in that quiet, everything felt so loud. The hum of the shuttle, the weight of the data they had destroyed, and the looming question of what came next. The mission was a success. They had exposed the conspiracy, dismantled Nereus's network, and wiped out the key data that would have secured his alliance with the Voidborn. But the victory felt hollow, as though they had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Declan sat beside her, his face still hard, but his eyes were filled with a quiet determination. The shuttle's autopilot was engaged, but neither of them spoke for a long moment. There was so much left unsaid. "We did it." Declan finally broke the silence, his voice hoarse as though it was the first time he had spoken in hours. "The data's gone. We've exposed them. Nereus will never be able to cover this up." Eva nodded, but there was no joy in the motion, only a heavy exhaustion. She thought of Zakar, her husband, and the life they had once dreamed of. A life now shattered by lies, betrayal, and violence. The truth had been exposed, but at what cost? "The fight's not over," Eva said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nereus will come after us. He'll have other allies, other plans. He's not done." Declan's eyes met hers, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a flicker of something softer in them, something almost human. "I know, but this isn't just about Nereus anymore. It's about the galaxy. The truth we uncovered is bigger than us. It's bigger than anything we could have imagined." Eva's breath hitched at the thought. They had unwittingly stumbled into a galaxy-wide conspiracy, one that reached deep into the heart of both the Astrian and human governments. The Voidborn alliance, the weapons deals, the technology exchanges, It wasn't just about power, it was about control, the kind of control that could change the fate of civilizations. "We've only scratched the surface," Ava murmured, staring out at the stars again. "The Voidborn aren't just enemies, they're part of something bigger. Narius. He was just the beginning." Declan nodded slowly as though accepting the gravity of her words. "I never thought it would be like this. When I joined the military, I thought it was all about protecting the Alliance. But now it's about survival. Ours and everyone else's." Eva turned to face him, her expression hardening. "We've made enemies. Powerful enemies. Narius won't rest until we're dead. And the Voidborn are no different. They don't forget and they don't forgive." Declan's lips tightened, his jaw clenched. "We can't outrun this, Eva. We'll have to fight together. We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for the future. For everyone who's been lied to, manipulated, and used by the likes of Narius." The shuttle hummed softly as they hurtled through space, the distant stars now nothing more than specks of light against the vast emptiness. The wreckage they had left behind, the destroyed servers, the crumbling conspiracy, was already beginning to feel like a distant memory. But the war they had just woken up to was only beginning. They couldn't hide from it, and they couldn't outrun it. "We'll need allies," Eva said, her voice steady now, more determined than ever. "We can't take on Narius and the Voidborn alone. We'll need to find those who still stand for what's right." Declan's eyes narrowed, a spark of resolve in them. "I've been working on that. There are still some loyalists within the Alliance, a few high-ranking officers who haven't been corrupted. They'll help us. But we need to move fast. The longer we wait, the more time Narius and the Voidborn have to cover their tracks." Eva's gaze flickered to the dashboard. Their course was set for the outer rim of the galaxy, where they hoped to find refuge and allies in the vast expanse of space. It was the only place left where they could regroup, plan, and prepare for the next stage of their fight. "You're right," Eva said, her voice hardening with purpose. "We need to go to the outer rim. That's where we'll find the support we need." Declan didn't respond immediately. He only nodded, his eyes locked on the stars ahead, his thoughts undoubtedly running through the same calculations as Eva's. They both knew what lay ahead. Danger, deception, and a fight that would test everything they had. But for the first time since they had stepped foot in this war, Eva felt a sense of clarity. This was no longer about revenge for Zacher, no longer about personal loss. This was about something far bigger, the fate of the entire galaxy. The shuttle's engines hummed louder as they set course for the outer rim, the stars outside streaking into lines as they accelerated into the unknown. The universe was vast and the enemy was everywhere. But they would no longer be mere bystanders in the galaxy's story. They would fight tooth and nail until the truth was exposed, until the galaxy was freed from the grip of those who would seek to control it. Eva turned to Declan, her eyes meeting his with a new understanding, a bond forged through blood, sacrifice, and shared purpose. "We fight together," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "No matter what happens, we do this together." Declan's gaze softened, the edges of his lips lifting in a rare, fleeting smile. Together. And as the shuttle cut through the void, the two of them ready to face whatever came next, they knew that this was only the beginning. The fight had only just begun, but they would stand strong no matter the odds. Together they would expose the lies, tear down the conspiracy, and ensure that the galaxy would never fall under the control of those who would seek to destroy it. The reckoning had begun, and they would see it through to the end.